Hey Dan, how you doing, buddy?
Hello, Dave. How are you doing?
Good, man. We're back at it, back in town,
Yep.
back in the swing of things.
Yeah.
Sort of, kind of. Takes a long time to get back into the swing of things. So
Yeah. Obligatory intro banter.
yes, I'm trying to turn everything off on my speaker because everything else just started playing again. That was really awkward. So it was banter, and we're gonna get started. Here we go.
All right, let's do it.
All right. I think everything's working. Yep. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, it was very disorganized getting in here, running ragged. We have a new puppy. I had to get that thing settled down for the evening.
Is that possible with a puppy?
No, it's downstairs yelping right now.
What's his name? Was it Fenway?
Yes.
I told all my Boston friends. I'm like, my friend got a dog named Fenway. It was like Fenway Park, dude.
Oh, I told that to someone else. They thought it was the stupidest thing ever. They're like, "Oh, I get it, because you're like from New England." I was like, "Well, yeah." I thought it was good.
What are you gonna name your dog, Buster?
Yeah, I feel like it'd be stupid if I lived there and I called it Fenway. That'd be like, "Oh, okay, whatever, buddy." But you know, it's
naming dogs after geographical places is like a new thing.
Is it?
I don't know that. It may not even be true at all. I had a neighbor who seems like he was pretty like with it, and he had two dogs named Raleigh and Memphis.
Ooh.
And apparently, like in his circles, I think like oh, look at that dog. His name is Cheyenne or Dallas or something. I don't know.
Cheyenne. Like Wichita. That's a good name.
No, I think that's actually, but it's also like a people naming trend. Like I think Burr talks about it. Like, yeah, we name people after areas of the country we don't want to go to. So it's like, super blue check people in like LA name their kids after like, Montana or something. Wichita or like, come here, Toledo.
Toledo. I don't think anyone wants to go to Toledo. But maybe not. Maybe there's a lot going on in Toledo, I'm sure. I haven't noticed. Yeah, no, I guess I've seen that. Also, it kind of feels like I don't know. I don't want to say anything mean about anybody's names. It's not my place. The trends are what they are. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I guess the question is, will the trend of like obnoxiously spelling names weird, is that gonna go out like the way it happened in band names? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there was a period where you had like Def Leppard and like, Decipher. Yep. Those are the first two examples I thought of.
Wow, you pulled Def Leppard and Decipher in the same one. That's pretty good.
But like nowadays, you don't really see. Well, there's no real bands nowadays, but like, no,
there aren't.
Yeah.
But see, it doesn't bother me if you want to do that, but then it just aggravates me when I go and type something or I want to say a text about someone and like I was like, I know this name isn't spelled like phonetically at all. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be so bad. I'm gonna brutalize your name. You're like, you don't even know how to spell my child's name. I'm like, you picked an odd spelling. Okay. All right. Let's just be honest.
Well, there was a meme, I think it was a couple weeks ago, that was like a picture of like all these like basic white girls in their fall clothes where they all look like Han Solo or whatever. They all had like the boots and the vest or whatever, and they were all named Ashley, but it was like each one of them was like labeled with a different spelling of Ashley, and it was like, oh god.
Hey, I know dudes named Ashley, so that can go full circle. Go either way. Go both ways.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I've known a couple Ashleys.
I've known a couple dudes named Aaron, like Erin.
Really?
I bet that. Yeah,
not pronounced. Not Aaron, not Aaron.
Yeah, not Aaron. But I mean, it's like it's phonetically so similar that I'm sure that got really confusing.
Yeah, for sure. That's all right. We pick traditionally masculine and feminine names, and then also we threw an H on the end of Nora, and that throws everybody off as well. So either way, who am I to speak?
Really? That throws people. I mean,
yeah. Well, it doesn't throw people off, but most people don't put it on there.
But it's like I think of like Nora Jones. There's an H on the end of that, right?
That's how we tell people. Like, well, Nora
There you
Jones
go.
has an age on it.
Or you
And
could just
we
be
are
really,
huge,
really,
I'm a
really
huge
strange.
Nora
Be like, no,
Jones fan.
Nora. It's like Nora the Explorer, and watch people go like, what?
What?
just to mess
Like,
with them.
Dora. I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure it's Nora. Like, that's why she loves the show.
There was like, do you remember that website from like 15 years ago called like Text from Last Night? It was like
No.
before even Twitter and Tumblr were like a thing. Anyway, it was just a collection of like people would submit random texts that they got from like their friends. Usually it relates to like partying and stuff and like
Oh, okay. That sounds
various
like fun.
questionable. Yeah, it was a funny little time hole that you could kind of read. Where my favorite one, I don't remember any of them, but except there was this one where like the one person says, I mean, the one he's like, dude, you were pretty drunk last night, and then the other person says, no, I wasn't. I really don't think I was. And he's like, dude. And it may have been a woman. I don't remember. He's like, at one point you couldn't find the car, so you ran up to that little Hispanic girl and said, "Dora, I need your map."
Nice.
Anyway,
I'll have to check this out though.
it may not still exist. I don't know.
No, it's still there. There's a website anyway. Textfromlastnight.com.
Okay, well,
But
20
this
years
doesn't look
ago.
like. Yeah, a lot of these are just like single texts. So, I guess okay, that makes
I don't
sense. Okay, whatever. Yeah. Okay, I'm moving on. What are we talking about, Dan? What do you want to
What are we talking
riff
about?
on?
I was scrolling through something at like 7 a.m, and I had this thought where it was like, and it's sort of half formed in my head, but it's like somebody was talking something about diamonds and how like like we have this weird cultural thing with diamonds, like we've all seen blood diamond, and like guys like us tend to be like cynical about like diamonds are kind of dumb, it's kind of foolish, and like
Yeah.
we all know that like it's kind of an invented scarcity, right? And so I guess it was like people were been talking about like the economy and stuff, and how like, well, if the dollar crashes, we're going to Bitcoin, and it's like, well, you got to put your money in precious metals, and like all these kind of things of like, how do we assign value to things?
Sure.
So I thought that the idea of like with diamonds and with, well, gold, it kind of doesn't always exactly work, because with certain elements there are like practical uses for them, right? Like
Yeah.
diamonds would be useful even if they didn't look cool, right? And gold has a lot of uses other than the fact that it's shiny. But for the most
Even
part, they're
pretty.
just sort of currency exchange, and they're only worth kind of what we ascribe to them, right? Like the ultimate example of that would be like a dollar bill, which is just a piece of flimsy
Piece of
paper
crappy paper. Yes.
that smells bad and probably has like feces and cocaine on it or something. I don't know. But
Oh,
like,
for sure.
but we assign that value, and if everybody has an agreed upon, and so we're talking about like inflation and everything, like,
Yep.
a dollar is only worth a dollar because there's a limited amount of it. If there was unlimited money, a dollar doesn't have the same buying power, right?
Exactly. Yep.
So I was listening to that and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, does value come from an intrinsic value, or does it come from an assigned, agreed upon value based on scarcity? And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because you could apply that to like a lot of stuff that we consider to be commodities and things that we want.
Yep.
And then I was like, oh, but what about people? Right? So like thinking about like how do we ascribe like self-worth or like value to like people we don't know, or skills and things like that? Are there certain, and I think a person's answer to this shows a lot about like how they view like themselves and other people. So there's a sort of traditional, I guess, well, not necessarily Judeo-Christian, but like most religious viewpoints are like, well, all people have inherent worth,
Correct.
and so your worth as a person isn't diminished simply because there are 6.9999 other billion people out there, right? Does a person have more value or worth if there's fewer other people? I mean, in a practical sense, So it's like, like say there was like a zombie apocalypse, and then the world's population went, like we would look at it and be like, does life become more precious because there's less of it, and we have to like, safeguard it? Or like, how would that affect how we view people? But, and so the other side of that would be like skill sets and like art and things that we do and create, so like a person's salary, the ability of a person to command a high salary is based on how many people can do what they do. Right. So I got this relative who is like some sort of engineer, rocket scientist person who like there was a roller coaster that broke at like Disney World or something, and like literally the only person in the country who could fix it was this guy. So he gets to command whatever he wants because he is scarce. There's only one of him. As opposed to, people like me who can fix computers or play guitar. Like there's a bazillion people who can do those things. But like to my children, I'm their only dad. Right. So there's all these different ways of like, depending on where you're getting your value from, like you could either see yourself as just like one of many and you're kind of anonymous worth, or you could like, do you focus on the things in which you are unique? And like, how do we treat other people like that? Like, are other people only useful? Like, do they only have value when they're useful to us? And I don't know. It just led me down this weird mental rabbit hole.
Yeah, yeah, you did. You just went. You just laid out like 18,000 pathways to go down.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was just kind of
all right. I'll try to throw out some thoughts that I thought of when you just said all that stuff. So interestingly, stuff on like the non-person side, value of objects and value of things. It's funny that like you could say that things are valuable because they're scarce. That is a thing, or they have utility. And that is a way we traditionally go through value. Like you said, like, so gold is valuable because it's not so kind of scarce, but it's also pretty and has utility. Water, on the other hand, has a lot of utility. It's valuable, but it's also very plentiful, so it's actually pretty cheap. So you can like get water for basically free. But like now there's another side of that. There's things that that is a set of value. There's also there is an intrinsic value to items and things. Maybe not intrinsic, but maybe maybe deeply personalized. So like things that you own, like keepsakes or items that you have that you personally hold lots of value to, that you would call invaluable. Like, but someone else would be like, that's an old pocket watch. You're like, well, that's my grandfather's pocket watch, like something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting.
I've got like 10 guitars sitting over here that very few of them are worth.
Which one can't you let go of, Dan? All of them. They all mean something.
Probably that one. That one's old enough to drink. The rest of them are not as valuable, but they're all
yeah, for sure. It's just it's an interesting thought. It's kind of systematic and it's kind of arbitrary all in one. You know what I mean? Like gosh, you started talking about cryptocurrency. I don't know how you can. That's just a means of exchange. Like currencies are some means of exchange of.
Well, that's what makes it so iffy, right? That's what's so everybody's watching it because they're like, is everybody going to jump on the thing where it's valuable? Because if everybody doesn't agree with its value, then its value is nothing. Then it's not because it doesn't even exist. There's no physical Bitcoin.
Right. Well, it's the same thing with the dollar. I mean, the dollar, like it's the piece of paper in itself is physical, but it's physically worth nothing. And it was only theoretically worth something when it was backed by
until gold.
Metal. Yeah,
thanks,
exactly.
Nixon. Was it Nixon?
Dang you, Nixon. Yeah, he finally kicked us off that thing. But that was just something that stuck out when you said that. So like value is very subjective on all sides, but like even small little things can be super valuable that have no value to anyone else. It can go both ways. It's a weird thing. But but with people, for sure. I mean, I guess I would obviously subscribe to the Judeo-Christian version of everyone has value intrinsic to their humanity as a reflection of being made in the image of God, and that's how that goes. But seeing other people as that is true, and that's good, and that's wise. But also, people do have different values. I don't want to say assign. You can appreciate other people more, or you can assign more value to other people by definition, right? Like I value my family more than I value a stranger, and that's not unfair, or that's not wrong to say. In fact, it'd be cruel of me to be like, I would put as much value on the well-being of a stranger on the street than over my own children. That would make me a bad father, Right. So I have to place. Maybe value is not the right term there, but I think it's pretty good though.
Priority.
I mean, so I guess it's the back thing. Like it's like the macro. You have value that society sees in a currency, a good, a value. There's value, and then from a personal level, it's you have on a person level, you have value that everyone's intrinsically value. We're all made equal. We're all human beings that deserve dignity. But then on the micro level, you can have that keepsake, you can have that watch that you only find valuable, or you put value over what other people would value it, and that you do the same thing for your family or your close relationships or people that you I'll say it, get utility out of, but I don't mean that in a negative way. Just like people that you have relationships with, and that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Little rambling there.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. Right, and I think the potential rabbit hole is like, we talk about this a lot, where it's like people with their viewpoints and stuff. A lot of people derive a lot of their self-worth by like the way they like, well, I have the right viewpoints about these things, so that makes me a good person, right?
Yep.
And or it's like, somebody's like, well, I did this and that and these kind of things, so that makes me a valuable person. Or I achieved this, right? Or I popped out 3 kids, and therefore that makes me valuable, just regardless of what kind of person I am, right? So everybody has these like different standards, and I think, think about like with people's jobs, like the cold capitalist version is that like the world doesn't owe you a living,
right?
So. But then the converse of that, like a more socialist thing, would be like, well, everybody deserves something from the system. And so, you have people like us who will talk about the intrinsic value and worth of people. But at the same time, we will also drop a hard truth bomb and be like, no, the world doesn't, owe you anything just because you exist. So it's like, how do we make sense of the two items? Like, yes, you have worth and value as a human being, as a person who has a soul. But at the same time, it's like, life, and existence in the way the world works is a bunch of cold, logical cause and effect. Like in nature, nature doesn't care whether this moose gets eviscerated by a pack of wolves or not. It doesn't.
Correct.
The principles of how genes move through natural selection, every gene is a selfish gene. They all want to propagate. You know what I mean? There's all these principles. So there's like almost sort of a cheapness to life. In that sense, if you look at things in purely like evolutionary standards. And so like, one of the things that humans have that makes us unique is that we have this belief that each individual life is, sacred or valuable or whatever.
Yeah.
But then there are some scenarios where we do apply that sort of cold, hard logic. Like, do we have sympathy for like truck drivers, or people whose livelihoods got replaced by an iPad? Like learn to code, there's like that kind of like callous thing. Just like, well, maybe we should just give everybody a bunch of money, like so it has some sort of political ramifications.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I get that too. And it makes sense. Even if you think about it in your personal relationships. So like, my kiddos offer little of no, utilitarian value in my life to like benefit me on like a subsistence level kind of thing. Yeah. They don't I have to care for them. They survive on me and my wife's taking care of them. And that's good. So like they have value. So therefore I care for them. I give them that, like in the example you had, like someone loses their job, you should give them money. Okay. Well, my kids didn't lose a job. They can't have a job, but I take care of them. That's the thing. However, if I were to stop paying my water bill and my heating bill and my, I didn't buy groceries, I can't expect those companies and Walmart to give me food, to give me electricity, to give me so it's that value is only, that's true, but my children still have that value intrinsically.
So what makes the difference? Is it makes the difference because they don't know you don't know them?
Well, there's got to be different tiers. That's what I'm saying. So, like,
right.
Of course, I don't think if you went to the CEO of Duke Energy, they'd be like, "Yeah, those kids deserve to freeze." But it's like, well, you didn't pay your bill, so I can't give you electricity for free. That's how this works. Like, so there, you said there's the cold truth there, and then it's just another observation that in the same breath, I have to have value for my kiddos, but then I also have to use other relationships that will I have to use the value that we get in that relationship, which is an economic exchange relationship only, to support my kids. I don't know, just interesting thought.
Well,
So then again, like,
go ahead.
Yeah, it's just just is it maybe a parallel, or maybe something. I heard something today. It was just a stupid minimum wage argument. It's just like, okay, can you name someone who in your life that doesn't deserve $15 an hour of a minimum wage? And you're like, well, that's not really the question, because in my life, no, I don't want anyone in my life to starve or have a physical hardship. But I can't go to like Wendy's and be like, you got to pay this person in my life that I know and love and care about $15 an hour to punch a couple buttons and throw French fries in a fryer, when that's only that only produces like $9 an hour of utility or $12 an hour in value. Like, that's not fair. So like there has to be different tiers of value in human relatiches, is what I'm getting at, I guess. And maybe that's what's missed. That's what's missed in the economic argument of like just generically speaking, welfare, minimum wage, healthcare, that kind of thing. Yes, we would want people to have all these things. I want people to have all these things. I would give people all these things if I had infinite supply of money and I could do that. But that's just not how the world works. So that's the common rub, the common wedge.
Right. So it sounds to me like we're talking about two different kinds of, like, value and human worth is not a zero-sum game, right? Meaning elevating one person's worth and value to a minimum level or an equal level, or however you'd want to describe it. One person's value as a person doesn't diminish anyone else's. There's not a set amount of value that has to be distributed amongst 7 billion or 7 billion and 1 or 10 people.
No, yeah, I guess.
However,
you can't do that.
The other version of value, maybe this is where people get confused, right? Maybe this is where we as a society have messed up, because we have this thing about worth and we start to conflate the two, because there is a version of worth that, resources are a zero-sum game. Yeah. So, yes, you absolutely will devalue a dollar by creating too many of them, right? And it's supply and demand. Like, I, as a guitar player living in Durham, have a certain amount of value in the musical landscape, whatever that would be. And I don't know the specifics, but I do know that if I were to move to Nashville, my value as a guitar player would be about like this.
Yeah, way smaller. Yep.
Not because I'm a worse player, but because there's a million people who can play better than me. Just walk down the street and person serving you coffee. So, where was I going with that? I had something I was going to say when you were talking. Oh, well, it brings to the idea of, like, maybe that's where tribalism comes from. Like, so you were talking about, like, the CEO of Duke Energy doesn't have an obligation to you, right? And, like, I guess maybe like in the earliest human societies, nobody knew of anybody other than their immediate family, right? Or their immediate group. So
very small number. Yep.
I'm not the first person to talk about it. I mean, people have been talking about this for years. It's like, as society has grown, our concept of what constitutes a tribe, the amount of people that we care about, that we feel an obligation to, has grown. And the problem is when your tribe that you identify with is so large that there's not an impersonal connection. And then you get into, like, ideology and nationalism, right? So it's one thing, like, think about, like, you watch, like, The Walking Dead, which nobody watches that show anymore. But, like, like, in that show, it's like you got Rick and then the crew, and there's like, there's like maybe 10 people, right? But then you can almost tell the writers, like, we got too many people in here. Like, we got to start killing some people off, right? It's hard for the viewer to track more than, like, the immediate group of people that you care about, right? And then anytime they get in the show, they get to a new scenario where they're like other people, like other mouths to feed, people who aren't as good with guns. It starts to get stressful because you're like, all right, something's going to happen here. Right? Because there's no way that all these people can be protected, right? And then they come up against some other group of, like, that's almost invariably led by some sort of tyrannical madman who, has no qualms about murdering these people over here that we happen to like in exchange to protect his claim. So it's like, it's basically the story of human history. So, like, as technology and, like, philosophy and, our capacity to, like, grow as a people, either through just, maturing and religion and all the things that we have, we've expanded this idea of the tribe. But it's like, maybe that is a little bit of a zero-sum game, right? Like, you can have unconditional love. Like, if it was just you guys, your group, my group, and then maybe like a couple few groups of groups, we would have like a very intense protective spirit, for the people in our group. But then as our tribal concept has expanded to be like, well, you're actually supposed to care about your whole city. And, we need to be thinking about actually the whole, actually the world. We really need to be thinking globally. And, we need to be making sacrifices for us, like, so that the whole world can benefit. And I guess because that's so impersonal, it's hard to care.
Yeah.
And it kind of almost cheapens the concept.
No, I can see that. Yeah, because it's like diffusing out. We said it earlier that there's like, it is like a zero sum. See on the fundamental value of human life, there's like a zero sum thing. You can't be more valuable or less valuable in your inherent humanity. Now, how that translates into like actual society, I don't really know. I think it translates into morality, it translates into theology, translates into philosophy, stuff like that. But you can't have equal value in that regard. But yeah, like you'd have these small, like you said, your small little section there, and that would be a high value familial kind of relationship. But even, I don't know, like in an example of like The Walking Dead or like end of the world scenario, there's like down to like 100 human beings, right? They are all intrinsically valuable on the same level. However, by definition, out of those 100 human beings, some of those people they're going to contribute more.
Yeah,
value.
There's going to be some utility there.
Yeah,
there's going to be a difference, right? Like the one person who's a doctor.
Yeah,
right. Or like say you had like 50 men and 3 women. Those 3 women are valuable.
Valuable, yes.
As cheap as it may sound.
Well, yeah, or vice versa. Like if there's only one man and there's 50 women, like the species depends on
make sure that guy doesn't get hit in the balls.
Yeah, get that guy a cup. Find that one cup. I know we had a nuclear holocaust, but there's got to be
keep him away from the radiation zone. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but like, and maybe that's another spot where some of the confusion might come in, because then, like on our end, we would both say, and I think it's fair to say, and it's moral and good to say, that if you provide a bunch of utility to your fellow man, and you're, say, compensated more, that is a measure of value and compensation because of your utility. And that's not bad. That's good. That's how you serve people. But it especially goes haywire when you then start going, well, you don't, if you are of the kind of person that says you don't contribute much, so therefore you're less valuable. Like, and then you take it to the intrinsic value. That you're trying to say you're less valuable as a human, or you take it the other side, be like Bill Gates, incredibly valuable, just contribution to mankind with the personal computer and the software and all that stuff. But if you elevate him to deity status, that's an inappropriate understanding of what his value is. Or if you know what I mean. I'm exaggerating. No one thinks he's a deity, but like, it's just a lot of people will just really, I guess, elevate those people to different statuses, and they don't need to be there either. They're just people that have been very helpful and have provided a lot to mankind, and that's a thing to celebrate, and that's good. But I don't know. It's not that they can't do any wrong. They can certainly do wrong, and they can do bad things with their wealth, and they can do bad things with their utility, and they do bad things with their influence. That's another thing. It gets kind of tricky, because then people start using their skills and their utility for nefarious purposes, one way or the other, self-serving, helping other people to other levels. I don't know. It's a very thorny, tricky issue.
Yeah, I guess you almost have to make like a hardline distinction, like where you say, all right, well, it's like, we joke around in my family. We're like, look, communism in the home, capitalism outside, in the sense that, like, dad buys the pizza and then we all share it, like, and we're all responsible in some way for like other people's feelings and stuff to work, like, and so that's what familial love is. Right. But outside, we would do ourselves a disservice if we tried to expect everybody else to behave that way, because that's just not how the world works.
Correct.
So, and that's not us being immoral, right? Like you saying, "Hey, look, I got to look after my family. I would love to work for you for free because you seem like a cool person, but I
Yeah.
can't do that. I'd be doing a disservice to myself and my family." And a normal person would understand that, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's where this idea of like, it's almost like an Ayn Rand thing, like we were talking about, like rational self-interest and like forced altruism, where it's like a person is at a better, you can't really contribute anything to society if you are having the fruits of your labor taken from you.
Yeah.
And, people, even the most evolved of us, kind of have to be selfish first before we even have anything to offer to other people.
Well, yeah,
So-
right. Yeah, if you're at subsistence level living, you can't, by definition, be altruistic in any way, shape, or form.
It's like the teach a man to fish, give a man a fish dichotomy.
Well, it's
right?
like a hierarchy of needs thing. It's like, it's legit. Like, you have to.
So it's like, yeah, if you talk about the minimum wage and stuff, it's like, well, I'm not saying a person does or doesn't deserve a higher minimum wage or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I would be happy for this person to be making more money, but specifically, I'd be happy for them to be participating in a balanced equation in which they were making more money for a good reason.
Right.
Right. So like that's the problem with like just general government handouts. You just give people more money, all you do is devalue the money.
Right. And you're right. Exactly. Same thing with the
But-
wage, though. The hyperbole is there. It's just like, well, if it's 15, why not 100? Right.
Yeah.
And then people go, well, that's absurd. Like, well, no, it's not, because you understand the principle.
Right. Because eventually they'll say, well, then how do you pay for that? And you go, boom.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But
Right. So,
that's kind of a side issue. But
well, it makes sense
Yeah.
though. I mean, it's about, teaching people. It would be the ideal scenario would be like, hopefully we can create a system where people have better job prospects and job opportunities.
Yeah.
Right. We're not just shuffling them off into, maybe that could be like, like we have better schools so that people don't think that people actually start thinking like, about the future instead of being like, just goofing off and said that we're to where a minimum wage job is their only option.
yeah, which gosh, just such a stupid argument, because like there's like very small people that even make the minimum wage that are grown ass adults trying to support a family. Like, it's a very small minority. Like even just the percentage of people that make minimum wage is super small. So it really is entry level jobs, and it's a dumb thing to argue about, but you would kill entry level jobs. I mean, that's what would happen. You would absolutely kill those things, or they would get automated away where they can. And then that might be happening anyway, but it'll just accelerate that.
Yeah.
But then that sucks though, because then you have, like it's even in an economic relationship, you derive value from each other outside of an economic thing. Like, you and your employer can learn from each other in a lot of different ways. You learn a lot of skills by working. You learn a lot of skills by managing. You learn a lot of skills by employing. And I don't mean skills. I just mean like relational things. Like, you get more than just, all right, I gave you a paycheck, you gave me 40 hours, or I gave you 40 hours, you gave me a paycheck. You can develop relationships, like lifelong things like that. You like just interpersonal skills that you gain from that are valuable, and they're part of being a human. So it's still, even just the whole idea of the economic thing just cheapens it, because you have to have that evaluation, but there's more to it than that. So that's why like internships are a thing. Like, an internship will give you experience, and like, so experience is a very, very, very valuable thing, and it has no dollar amount that you can necessarily put on it. But I mean, I guess you can in some sort of circumstances. But I don't know. Like, I did internships. Like, it was fine. Like, it wasn't like my only thing I did in my life. But I mean, I did stuff to get my foot in the door and get a certification or get something that I needed to do. That was valuable, and I didn't get paid, or I got paid very little.
Yeah.
Like here's a stipend for gas.
Right. With the caveat that, internships are a luxury of at least the middle class.
Sure. Right.
But is there any way around that? Like,
yeah.
I think that's maybe this is where one of the whole breakdowns of sort of a political divide comes from, because, the idea of like what are rights, there are
Yep.
rights that people have as people, and then people. I think there's a huge weird confusion with like, okay, what do human beings have as rights, and are those things like intrinsic to them, or are they like now people will just say anything that's nice that would be good for everybody to have. They'll be like, that's a
Is
right.
right. Yeah.
I'm like, you're kind of cheapening it, right? Because like when you elevate commodities and things that are cool to the status of right, now you're just saying it cheapens the stuff that we really do value, right? So if you said clean water or healthcare is a right, I was like, okay, well, that's subject to market forces, right? Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want my free speech subject to market forces. I don't want, like, if we can afford it, we'll give everybody this thing that is a right to them. If we can make the numbers work, we give them free healthcare. I don't want my right to due process being contingent upon whether we can make the numbers work or right, or not. So
yeah, I think that was a big mistake by including the Bill of Rights in the Constitution, because it's not necessary. Like, the Constitution was written as a document that only allowed the federal government to do a few things, didn't grant any powers. But then when you have the Bill of Rights, it kind of like says, "Oh, you have the freedom of speech because we put that in here. You have the right to bear arms because we put that in here. You have the right to, not be searched and, search and seizure against that because we put that in there." Like, no. Those rights were there. This is just us reiterating it on paper.
I think that depends on how you read it. I mean, to me, it always seems like because you're going to have people who interpret the Constitution as liberally as possible for the sake of power, it behooves us to define, oh, hold on a second. No matter how you interpret this first section here, this first part, let's make sure that these things aren't infringed. So I think it's just like knowing what we know about how people work. You absolutely have to have.
I get the reasoning. All I'm saying is now people have reversed the reasoning, and they see it as if it's not expressly like disallowed.
Right. If it's not enumerated, then you don't deserve it. Right? Or no? What do you mean?
If it's not enumerated, you don't deserve it. No, I think people are saying, if it is enumerated. Well, no, there are people who say even if it is enumerated, they don't. Either way, the Constitution's been bastardized. But I think people see it like they see. I'm saying that the deterioration of the idea of rights is that it's a government allotted, provided
right, as opposed to pre-existing.
Right,
because they forgot to read the part that says, we are endowed by our Creator.
Right. If everybody understood that the laws just codify rights and recognize rights, I would say it's okay. But most people don't see it that way. They looked, because then they go, the government protects my rights, therefore the government grants my rights. Now I can look for the government. Anything the government does, therefore, becomes a right. So if the government does something that we would deem as inappropriate, they can go, well, that's a right because the government's doing it. I have a right to it because the government's doing it. That's a right. But okay, we're not using the same words. We're using the same word.
The government doesn't get to define what the right is.
No.
But I see. Okay, now I'm getting what you're saying. So you're saying that while the Bill of Rights was well intended and it makes sense on most levels, the fact that they set a weird precedent by listing a bunch of stuff. Because it meant that future generations were going to look back and be like, oh, okay, so the government is in charge of what rights I have. I got it.
Right.
No, that's not what that means.
Yeah. Because there's even
because whoever grants you the right also has the privilege of defining how that right goes. It's just like, if the government gives you money for something, they get to tell you how to use it.
Yes, correct. Right. That's very true. Exactly. And no, that's a good way of putting it. Because like in the 10th Amendment, even says like the rights not explicitly enumerated here are granted to the people. Like it's already there. They already have it, or the states respectively. So that just says like, hey, we're just saying to be clear, the federal government won't do these things, but everything else, by the way, you can still do. Like you still have all of your rights ahead of this. So whatever. But it's just, you're right. The question of rights is a question of value. And we get hung up on what kind of value we're talking about, and what people take their intrinsic human value thoughts on their social circle, and they expand it to society. On I think probably too far that can be managed, and too far than that's necessary.
Yeah,
Well-intended, well-meaning, like not in a negative way. But I mean, I think there's negative consequences for that. It's impossible to maintain, and it's impossible to pay for, and impossible to actually care for anybody really on that level. Like just throwing stuff at people doesn't mean you care for them. To some degree it does, but you have to physically throw it. It has to be your stuff. You know what I mean? Because it's like, I don't know, like you give like 25 cents a day to like some kid in Africa. People are like, oh, do you really care about that kid in Africa? But like, well, I gave him my money. Like I cared enough to give it to him. I would care less if I took your 25 cents a day and gave it to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so like there is something to say of economically helping people who are far away from you, outside of your circle, and saying, hey, I'm helping because I see value in that person and I want to help them. That is a moral and good thing to do. But when you take someone else's finances to do that for you, that's not doing anything. And that's what ends up happening in government stuff. That's just the reality of it. And because like you said that the term earlier, like we should help each other. We want to, if we could afford to give everybody, there's no we. There's individuals whose money is taken or devalued and borrowed against.
I mean, that's we. We're all part of we, right? I don't know.
Yeah, but that's my point. You can't be moral and good and caring for other people with with a third party's resources. You can only do it with your own. I will stand by that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all. So
I've been thinking about this for most of my adult life, and you probably have too, in some sense. Like being a musician, I would say that people in the arts are uniquely familiar with the idea of something's value and its worth being a separate thing from its monetary and practical. You know what I mean?
Yes,
like,
for sure. Yeah,
because we've all played shows. You know, like I mean, maybe this is a great example, right? Like
I've only lost money playing music. By the way, I've never made any money playing music. Just
the intrinsic value, like if you were to, the value of play that funky music in front of a bunch of drunk people at a bar can be calculated in dollars. And not that I don't like that song, it's fun, but like that's going to have a lot less value to me personally than like say playing one of my songs.
Yeah.
Which would invariably gross $0. So if you just looked at the dollar aspect of it, you know, nobody, and I see this a lot like on the musician forums, you know, like, you know, people are just talking shop about how to do it. And, you know, and we all have to sort of make that, find our own personal balance of stuff that people like versus stuff that we like, you know, like people go like, oh, let's do a Rush tribute. And it's like, okay, well, if that makes you happy, more power to you. Just understand the economics of that.
There's like 6 people that want to see a Rush tribute band.
Yeah, you go.
I'm one of them, by the way.
I would love to do that. Yeah. So I would play in a Rush tribute. I just have to. I would have to practice. But like,
me too.
Like, or it's like people who want to do original music. Like, well, nobody likes original music, man. And it's like, well, you like it, you know. Like, you just we all have to understand. Like, there's economic realities. So, you know, I remember thinking as a young person when I was sort of being dragged kicking and screaming into adulthood that like and I was sort of in a unique situation because I was like, all right, look, I'm not just in charge of myself here, right? I'm in charge of a family. So I don't get the luxury of being like, well, you know what I think, you know, what was it what Jack Black says in School of Rock? It's like, look, I service this community by rocket, you know, like I didn't get that luxury. Right. And so at the end of the day, like, it doesn't matter what you think, what you do, how great it is. If somebody's not willing to pay for it, then, you know, what are you going to do? You know, like you could make soaps and go sell them at the farmer's market and try to charge $100 a soap because that's what it's worth to you because you put your heart and soul into that soap. But, you know, if nobody else is going to walk, you know. So, but then I remember thinking because it would benefit me personally to think this way. I've been like, well, okay, all the people saying that like, well, you know, just get a job in engineering or, you know, go into computer science, you know, which is what I did. But it's like, you know, it's like, you know, people who would kind of poo-poo I would never expect people to just like give me money to be a musician, right? If it didn't have some sort of value. But it would be nice if regular people who were like all left brain and weren't into that at all, it would be nice if they had a little bit of perspective and would think back and go like, okay, well, how about you take a week and you don't listen to the radio, you don't listen to the Spotify, and every movie that you go to see is in like black and white, or like there's no if you took
there's no soundtrack,
and Oof. Like and nobody acted, everybody just you had a computer read the lines, or even the lines weren't even written by so if you took all of the art out of life, I think a lot of people don't realize how bland that everything would look like Soviet architecture. There would be no Teslas on the road, every car would be a boring ass Toyota Camry. Like, or every car would be shaped like a box. It would just be, there would be nothing, there's artistry in like so many of the things that we take for granted that we just, So it would be nice if people who kind of like, poo-pooed the artistic spirit in their kids or in their people that they're teaching or whatever would understand that like, yeah, there is a societal value. And then like, maybe we can make art and, music and writing and film and TV and stuff like that. We can make that stuff more financially viable by supporting the artists that we know. And then, there's a whole argument there, like, of people voting with their dollars. And so the advent of like streaming services and like Netflix and stuff like that, we don't put what it is like when your favorite band would come out with an album and you're like, oh shoot, that comes out today. Well, I'm gonna drive using gas to the store and pick up a CD and sit there in the car and read all the liner notes and be like, oh, somebody played drums on that. That's kind of cool. Like nobody does it anymore. Even for my favorite bands, I don't buy the physical CD. I listen to it and I like it, and I'm a musician. I should appreciate this stuff even more.
I do download them on their release date if I can. That's about as close as I get for like 3 or 4 bands I want to do that with.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, like Shayla and I were just talking about this. I mean, her album.
And by download, I just mean like I listen to it as soon as it's available on Spotify.
Yeah, you stream it, right?
I stream it live.
Yeah. Well, Shayla and I were talking about that. Like I was kind of telling her, I'm like, because her album comes out on Friday, and like she was debating, like, should I get some CDs made? I mean, I'm like, look, we both know nobody buys CDs.
Yeah.
But she's like, well, I think I have enough, friends and family that would probably do it. I'm like, yeah, that's fine, and we both know that like that's not a money making thing. That's a thing.
Yeah.
It's
they're almost like promos now. Yeah, they're like stickers now. Like, here's a CD. If you can find a CD player, you can play it.
She was even thinking about getting some vinyls made, and but she knows it would be for the posterity. It's like buying a thing to put on your wall.
Yeah, it's like it's a physical copy, which is still cool to have. Yeah, I agree.
I have many physical copies of my albums that I've done, because as we all, so it's like
nobody wants them, CDs wise.
Yeah, hard copies. So I feel like musicians get that, and I don't know. It would be nice if maybe there was a little bit more cultural appreciation for that. Even movies nowadays, like with people, like, I mean, I say that I love going to the movies, or at least I used to, but like now, I guess because I'm so busy, I'm like, ooh, I have a night where I can stay home by myself. That's pretty damn cool. I'm gonna watch this on Netflix, and I don't get that experience of like forking over $8 to go watch a movie in a cinema,
Yeah, there's only a handful. Like I want to go see that new Ghostbusters movie in the theater. I think that'd be fun, big and loud. But I mean, there's only a handful of things that makes sense. But it's also tougher when you have a family and kids don't want to do that stuff necessarily. Yeah. But like, it's just talking like with like a musicianship and arts and all that stuff, and then like pivoting to like a minimum wage and seeing what's valuable in a person. Like, and you've talked about this too a lot. It's like the UBI thing is like a point you like to bring up, but like people are just like, well, then we'll give everybody a base of monetary value that's somehow equal to their human value, and that'll allow them to explore their human value and be fulfilled. And it doesn't work that way, I don't think. You can't just give that kind of you can't take monetary market value and then translate that to human value. I just don't think you can.
No, you can't. And I think if it's the people that here's what it is.
Real quick question. Like, so if, as a struggling musician, if you had been like, I played some shows, I grew a fan base, they appreciated my music, they bought my stuff, I now make a living at it. That, or it'd be like, I went to a club and there's a law that the club has to pay me $500 to play. Be like, okay, and like nobody's in there, or people were in there just drunk. They're just like, all right, play the songs that you know you have to play. It's like that's not the same. That's not the
Mustang
same thing.
Sally.
Yeah, yeah. Like, all right, right. So that's just not the same. That's not the same. That even that monetary value isn't derived in a way that should lift you up. I guess if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like being thrown money to compensate for something doesn't give your life any more meaning or any more value. You can't raise that baseline. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, I guess you could free up some more time for your hobbies, but like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But like,
Well, I think that's where some of this breakdown occurs is because everything is done by politicians and people who have to be elected, is that they use the language of inherent human worth to justify their things that aren't questions of human worth, right? So they confuse it. So, like saying like, okay, well, people deserve talking about rights that we talked about earlier, like like free speech and freedom of assembly and stuff like that. It's like, oh yeah, each person, because we're all human beings and we deserve these things, right? But then they'll use that kind of language to describe things that aren't really exactly the same, right? Like, yeah, everybody deserves free speech and freedom of association and assembly and stuff like that, because those things aren't taking from anyone else. Those are just people exist and they have these things.
Yeah, that's just you exercising, you being alive.
And so, but they'll use that language of inherent worth, being like, don't you think that this mother of three deserves to be? I'm like, like, are you saying you don't want her children to be able to have clean clothes to go to school? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. See, that's a good point. Like, yes, I'm not saying I don't want them, but also I'm not saying she deserves them. Like, that's not.
And there's two different versions of the word deserve. There's deserve.
Yeah.
Everybody deserves respect and empathy as a person.
Right.
But when you're talking about physical commodities, we don't have the luxury of just deciding that people deserve things.
Right. Like in the example of like nuclear holocaust, 100 people alive. Everyone's like, well, I deserve clean water, running water. I'd be like, that doesn't exist. Sorry. If it doesn't exist, you don't deserve it. Like, you don't deserve it. Sorry. You deserve the opportunity to get that water, or to make water, or to find water and purify it and clean it and use it, or to make a plumbing service for your home. Like, you deserve all those things. You deserve that opportunity. You don't deserve to have it because it requires someone else to do it. Typically.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can, yeah. Right.
If you don't, I mean, what's Elon Musk says? If we don't make stuff, there's no stuff. Somebody's got to make the stuff.
That's true. Yeah. You got to, yeah.
So, I mean, we're getting to a sort of
simplistically brutal statement that like people would just be like, well, that's dumb. I'm like, no, it's pretty stout. Actually,
well, it's like, people think, and we're getting way off topic here, but like, people think that the existence of a hierarchy is an example of a broken system. Yeah. Right. So people have this idea. They think that what equality means is that everyone is equal. Right. But there's a lot of different versions of what people being equal means. Right.
Yeah. So well, equality, everyone is equal. Not everyone has equity. That's
right.
What people,
well, yeah, people confuse those two terms. Right.
Yeah.
So if your version of people being equal is that everybody gets the same, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Right. Because not everybody is the same, right? Some people are way smarter than each other, right? Some people are uniquely gifted. Some people are kind of useless. Some people are super attractive, and some people aren't. And some people are real nice. Some people are jerks. And sometimes being nice is not value. Sometimes it is. Like,
yeah.
I was just literally talking to my kids in the car, I forget how we got on the subject, but I was like, well, everybody's different, and I think it was obvious. She's like, why is that? What if, she said, like, what if everybody was the same? Like, this was like, like 7:20 in the morning. We're all kind of like waking up. I was like, what?
My coffee hasn't kicked in yet, kid.
It was like, yeah, the world would be pretty boring, because like if everybody was the same, then like you wouldn't have rocket scientists and people building stuff. Like, I don't know how to build a car, like, and you'd have nobody who could play music and do things that we like doing and stuff. So, like, the fact that there is a hierarchy, and there are multiple hierarchies that all exist simultaneously, where some people are going to be at the top and some people are going to be at the bottom, that in and of itself is not people look at that and they think that's wrong, but like, no, that's not a bug. That's a feature.
Yeah.
So I think that would be the thing that people would have to that they'd have to be red pilled against. Just the fact that somebody's higher up than you doesn't make them bad. Doesn't mean that the system is broken. The system is working, because literally every system in existence has some sort of hierarchy.
Right.
So,
well, it's funny, because like even then, like you're just like, all right, so there's someone who's better at making cars than me. Like Elon Musk or whatever. Elon Musk will contribute so much more to society than I ever will. However, I presume when I die, my kids are going to be way more upset when I die than when Elon Musk dies.
right.
You know what I mean? Because there's no straight line through that.
They are not obligated to assign worth to him because he happens to have a higher level of utility.
Right, but even then, just even speaking of hierarchies, like, yeah, that dude's way up there, but like in your personal life, you are very meaningful to other people. Most of the time. I mean, I understand there's tragedies where people aren't valuable to anybody, and that's awful. But that's just a fact of life that happens sometimes. But like to look at someone and go, all right, so there's this weird hierarchy, and everyone puts a lot of value on him. The value I think I should have on myself. But like, well, you probably have that value on yourself, and you can probably rest in that and be happy. And then from like a theological standpoint, you can find rest in that, the God of the universe finds value in you if you believe that kind of thing. So that's kind of like the nice little Christian thread in there that works really well.
Well,
but a lot of people
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was saying it was just like, and even that is missed and overlooked by, Christian people, observant Christian people, like on a day-to-day basis. It's easy to forget that and to feel unvaluable, even if you're not looking at it the way we're talking about it in like a political sense,
Right. So maybe the solution here is something we've already, like, okay, so talking about the hierarchy thing, and this is one of my favorite things to talk about, which is like the Jordan Peterson philosophy, where he's all the time talking about hierarchies and how like they're not inherently bad, and describing them does not mean an endorsement of it. It's just describing the science of it. Yeah, and if human history tells us anything, it's that the benefits of a free society is that you don't ever grow out of needing hierarchies. What you do is you grow into maintaining multiple hierarchies so that everybody has a higher chance of finding one in which they can thrive.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the answer here, that the solution isn't to beat yourself up trying to figure out like, well, what does value mean? It's to accept the fact that there are multiple versions of value.
Yeah.
Right.
That's good. There
are different little hierarchies of value that every person and everything and every situation that you have is going to have a slightly different valuation on those different versions, and that's okay. Because if you try to oversimplify it and be like, no, this is more important than this, then you just end up disappointing yourself and other people. I remember having this conversation, 10 years ago, like with my previous relationship partner, getting irritated at me because like I was
Jeremy. Jeez, man, you could say his name.
That son of a bitch. No, so I would be playing music, and it would be like, well, okay, it just feels like you like music more than me. I'd be like, well, I do that for like 2 hours a week. You know,
but
like
that's you all the time.
That's apples and oranges. Like I don't understand. That's like asking me, like, well, which do you like more, television or pizza? Like, okay, it's just two different strains, like, you know, of saying what, because we're complicated. And I remember being so frustrated with that conversation because it was just such an oversimplification of, looking at things. But so that's the problem where you get into it, right? Or if you look at, say, like people talking about like the government spends more on NASA than they do on blank, 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 whatever it is they're doing, which is not really true. NASA's budget it's like
very
pennies
small
on the dollar. It's like fractions of a penny on the dollar. But like you could say like, yeah, but well, okay, maybe that's actually a legitimate argument when you talk about the government, because the government only can do things because they have money that they take from people. So in that sense, maybe you could justifiably criticize the government. It's like, oh, you're spending X dollars on this, but not on this. Therefore, you're valuing A more than B. But I don't think you can say that about people, right?
No, probably not.
I don't know.
Yeah, No, I think I agree, or I do agree. Yeah.
Or I mean, because not everybody's in the same place. I mean, like as you transition from your 20s into your 30s, and then into
Yeah,
your
that's what I was going to
40s,
say.
which do you have more of, money or time? You know, like this week, I felt like I have had no time, but I do have a little bit more money. You know, whereas back in the day, I had way more time and way less money.
No
so,
money. Yeah,
you know, where I choose to allocate those things might look different now versus.
Yeah, just the thought of there's there's like a literal multiverse of hierarchies out there that like you can't even, because everyone values everything differently. Everyone's in a different spot, and like you could never normalize that across all of humanity. You can't even normalize it in your life from year to year to year, like you were just saying. Like when you were younger, you might value more money because you have none. That you might put up, you're like, oh, well, I could go do this and make an extra $1,000. That'd be very, very helpful because I have so much ample time on my hands. I could do that. But now if you're older, maybe you're just like, all right, well, maybe I can make an extra $1,000, but I got to hang out with my kids. I got to do this. I value my time for those things, which don't make, and that's just you in a very narrow circumstance from like 10
I've been
years
thinking
to 10
about that
years.
a lot. That's because I haven't really had like a weekend to just chill with my kids in like months. I'm like, you know what? I think I might take that over a $400 gig nowadays.
Right, exactly. So like it's very fluid. Hierarchies are fluid. Everything's fluid. In social interactions, the fluidity is very overlooked, I think. And people want to make it like a static thing that they can figure out. That's why it's like social sciences seem like a kind of a bullshit thing to me, but I don't know. I guess there's arches and over there's trends. I guess you can I don't know, whatever. It just seems like the human condition is very complicated, and to try to like I said, normalize it, or to try to like put a cap or a base or a bottom or a minimum on anything is just like, how do you do that? I don't think you can.
Yeah, so it took us an hour to come up with the idea that there really isn't an answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Just pontificating for just whistling past the graveyard over here. That's what we're doing. We're all screwed, Dan. It's never gonna end.
Yeah, pretty much. All right.
I'm good with an hour. I don't think I could.
Yeah, me too.
Pontificate harder on this one. But it was a good thought, man. I liked it. I'll give it some more thought. It was a lot to think about. Going in here blind, so you're opening you're opening 10 minutes of questions. Like just kind of. I'll listen to that again. And I'll be like, oh, I should have said this. Oh, I should have thought about that.
Yeah, it's like doing a press conference. It'd be like, you got a question? He's like, yeah.
I got like 30.
Okay. Number one.
All right, moving on to the next thing.
Yeah, we're gonna circle back to that one.
We'll circle back to that guy.
Yeah.
Well, and if we're talking about value and all that stuff, we could definitely say that gingers have no souls.